I wore my mother's sapphire ring that Friday night, just to remind myself someone still stood by me. Daryl, my stepfather, grabbed my wrist, growling that his family's property didn't belong to a freeloader. He slapped me in front of the relatives. They didn't know. That ring never belonged to my mother, and certainly not to Daryl. It was a token from a man they'd never understood, and it was the key to flipping the entire board. My name is Laurel Quinn, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be back in my childhood bedroom, staring at water stains on the ceiling while my mother's new husband turned our family home into his personal kingdom. The divorce papers had been signed 3 weeks ago. Marcus kept the condo in downtown Ashford Ridge, and I kept my sanity. Barely. 23 months of marriage dissolved into a checking account with 4 digits and a U-Haul's worth of belongings. Mom insisted I come home, just until you get back on your feet. But home wasn't the sanctuary I remembered. Daryl Hollis had married my mother Evelyn 2 years ago, right around the time my own marriage started crumbling. He owned Hollis Renovations, a small construction company that somehow always had just enough work to justify his Mercedes in the driveway, but never enough to finish the kitchen remodel he'd started on our house 6 months ago. He also managed the Hollis Family Outreach Fund, a charity that seemed to exist primarily on paper and charity galas where Daryl could glad-hand Pine County's business owners. Laurel, we need to discuss your contribution to the household. Daryl announced that first week, spreading expense spreadsheets across the dining table like battle plans. Mom sat beside him, her hands folded, that sapphire ring catching the light on her finger. Since you're staying here, it's only fair. Fair. The word tasted bitter. His daughter Tessa lived in the converted garage apartment rent-free with her 7-year-old son. She helped with Daryl's business by answering phones twice a week. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks as a compliance investigator at Northlight Ledger, a fintech company that specialized in catching the kind of financial irregularities I was starting to notice in my own home. I'll contribute, I said, keeping my voice level, a skill honed from years of depositions and audit meetings. What's the monthly amount? $1,500 should cover it. Mom's sharp intake of breath was barely audible. The mortgage on this house was $2,200. I knew because I'd helped Mom refinance it after Dad died 8 years ago. That seems high for a third of household expenses, I said, pulling out my phone to take notes. Another professional habit. Document everything. Daryl's jaw tightened. It includes utilities, food, and improvements to the property. This house needs work. Laurel, your mother understands that investments in our home benefit everyone. Our home, the house my father bought in 1994. The house where Mom raised me. Now it was ours. But the hour never seemed to include me. 3 weeks into this arrangement, I watched Daryl transform the formal living room into his office. Blueprints and invoices covered surfaces that once held family photos. He'd moved Mom's piano, the one Dad bought for their anniversary, into the basement, temporarily. Tessa started parking her second car in my designated spot, forcing me to park on the street. Small erosions of space, each one calculated to remind me I was a guest in what used to be home. "Why don't you just get your own place?" Tessa asked one evening, helping herself to the dinner I'd cooked while Mom was at her book club. "Might be easier for everyone." "Might be," I agreed, noting how she didn't offer to pay for the groceries she was loading onto her plate. The truth was, I could afford an apartment, but something kept me here. Maybe stubbornness, maybe concern for Mom, who seemed smaller somehow, quieter since Daryl had moved in. She'd stopped wearing her favorite yellow cardigans, stopped playing piano in the evenings. Now she wore neutral colors that Daryl approved of and spent her evenings reviewing his business papers while he watched financial news at volume level 40. That Friday, everything shifted. Mom had slipped into my room that morning while Daryl was at a job site. "Keep this safe for me," she whispered, pressing the sapphire ring into my palm. Her hands were cold, trembling slightly. "Just for a while." "Mom, what's—" "Please, Laurel, just wear it. Promise me." I'd slipped it onto my right hand, the weight of it unfamiliar, but oddly comforting. By evening, when Daryl saw it at dinner, his face had turned the particular shade of red I associated with failed audits and SEC violations. "Where did you get that?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Mom asked me to wear it." "Evelyn?" He turned to her, and she seemed to shrink further into her chair. "It's just for—" "That ring belongs to this family, my family." He stood, the chair scraping against hardwood. "Take it off." "No." The word hung between us like a challenged contract. In my professional life, I'd faced down CEOs and CFOs who thought they could intimidate their way out of compliance violations. But this was different. This was personal. "Take it off." Each word dropped like a gavel. "It's my mother's ring. She asked me to wear it." What happened next would become evidence item number 1 in the file I'd build. But in that moment, it was just shock. The sting of impact, the taste of copper in my mouth, and the sound of my mother's gasp as Daryl's hand connected with my face. The envelope my mother handed me 3 days after the incident was sealed with wax, an oddly formal touch that immediately set my compliance instincts on alert. The return address read, Marlowe and Keene, Attorneys at Law, a firm I recognized from Ashford Ridge's business district. "Read it alone," Mom whispered, glancing toward the garage where Daryl was loudly discussing invoices on speakerphone. "Everything you need to know is in there." I waited until midnight, door locked, laptop open to record my findings. Another investigator's habit. Inside the envelope, a handwritten letter on legal letterhead, dated 7 years ago, and a document that made my pulse quicken, an addendum to a trust I never knew existed. The letter was from attorney Rhea Keene. "Dear Laurel, if you're reading this, your mother has given you the sapphire ring. This ring belonged to your father, Cole Brennan, not to your mother, as you've likely believed. It served as his father's signet before him, and now it serves a very specific legal purpose. Your father established the Brennan Harbor Trust before his death. While the cancer took him quickly, his foresight did not fail. The ring is more than memory. It's a legal trigger." I photographed every page, uploaded them to my secure cloud, then kept reading. Cole Brennan. My father had been many things. A quiet man who read maritime histories, who built model ships with impossible patience, who established a private equity fund that nobody talked about at dinner. Brennan Harbor Trust apparently held more than memories. According to the documentation, it held 40% of the equity in our family home, purchased through the trust before my parents' marriage, a portfolio of municipal bonds worth approximately $400,000, most crucially, a controlling interest in something called EQ Holdings, which owned the deed to our house. The addendum was precise in that way only estate lawyers achieve. The designated heir, identified by possession of the Brennan family ring upon express delegation from Evelyn Quinn Brennan, now Evelyn Quinn Hollis, shall assume the role of successor trustee with immediate effect. This triggers A. Full audit rights over any financial instruments involving trust property. B. Veto power over any transaction involving the primary residence. C. Immediate freezing of any unauthorized liens or encumbrances. My mother hadn't just given me jewelry. She'd handed me a loaded weapon. I pulled up property records on my laptop. Public information. All of it. The house deed had been transferred to EQ Holdings 3 years ago. Mom's signature was on the transfer, but the timing was suspicious. That was 6 months before she met Daryl at that charity fundraiser. Another search revealed Hollis Renovations had filed 3 mechanics' liens against properties in the past year, all settled out of court. The Hollis Family Outreach Fund? Its 990 forms showed donations coming in but surprisingly little going out, except to administrative expenses that matched Daryl's Mercedes lease payments to the dollar. My phone buzzed. Mom. He's asking about the ring again. Says we need to update estate planning documents tomorrow. I typed back. Stall him. I need 48 hours. The trust documentation included contact information for Rhea Keene. Despite the late hour, I composed an email from my Northlight Ledger address. Professional credibility mattered. Within 20 minutes, she replied. Miss Quinn, I've been expecting your contact. Your mother indicated you might need guidance. The ring you now possess is recognized by the trust as a physical bearer instrument. Think of it as a key that only works when handed to you by your mother directly. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 7 a.m., before Mr. Hollis would expect you to be anywhere? I confirmed, then turned to page 3 of the trust documents. There it was, a clause Cole Brennan must have added when he was diagnosed. Should Evelyn remarry, the trust remains dormant unless activated by the designated heir's possession of the signet. Upon activation, all property transfers require dual authorization, retroactive to the date of remarriage. Retroactive. Every document Daryl had filed using the house as collateral, every loan against the property, every attempt to leverage my mother's assets. If I activated this correctly, it would all unwind like a snarled fishing line suddenly cut free. I opened a new spreadsheet, the kind I'd build for a suspicious transaction report. Date of Mom's remarriage to Daryl. Date of property transfer to EQ Holdings, predating the marriage. Daryl's attempts to access home equity. 3 applications. All strangely incomplete. The kitchen renovation that never ended but generated $200,000 in invoices. The ring sat on my desk, its sapphire dark in the lamplight. Not my mother's ring at all, but my father's. A man who'd built contingencies into contingencies. Who'd seen something coming even if he couldn't name it. I pulled up one more document, this one from Pine County's business registry. Hollis Renovations had filed for a major expansion loan last week, listing our house as primary collateral. The application was pending, awaiting one signature. My mother's, the morning after meeting with Rhea Keene, Daryl transformed our house into his personal headquarters. He commandeered the dining room table with loan documents, converted Mom's craft room into a filing center, and held contractor meetings in our living room at 7 a.m. sharp. The message was clear. This was his domain now. Your mother and I are building something here, he announced over breakfast, spreading renovation quotes like tarot cards. The Hollis legacy. Tessa understands family investment. You could learn from her. Tessa, who hadn't paid a dime in rent, nodded while texting on her phone. The latest model, naturally. Her son played games on his tablet at the table, volume at maximum. When I reached to turn it down, Daryl blocked my hand. Let the boy enjoy his breakfast. This is his home. His home, not mine, never mine, according to Daryl's calculations. I studied the invoices while eating my toast. McKay Plumbing, $15,000 for copper pipe replacement. Interesting, since I'd seen the plumber here exactly twice. Eastwood Electric, $22,000 for comprehensive rewiring. The lights still flickered in the upstairs bathroom. Each invoice had Daryl's signature and a stamp from Hollis Renovations marking it verified and approved. These costs seem inflated, I said, my compliance training making silence impossible. Market rate for copper replacement is... Market rate? Daryl's laugh had edges. This isn't some corporate audit, Laurel. This is skilled labor, union wages, quality materials. Not that you'd understand. Pushing papers all day. All. Mom poured coffee with shaking hands. The pot rattled against Daryl's cup. Careful, Evelyn. That's the good china. His tone was soft, but she flinched anyway. I documented everything in my phone. The inflated invoices. The way Mom's shoulders curved inward when he spoke. How Tessa smirked when Daryl mentioned the family investment that somehow only required my financial contribution. That evening, Daryl escalated. He'd discovered I'd been asking questions at Pine County's records office about the mechanic's liens. What exactly are you investigating? He cornered me in the kitchen while Mom was upstairs. You think you're some kind of detective? I'm a compliance investigator. It's literally my job to notice irregularities. This family isn't your job. You're a guest here. Temporary. It's my mother's house. Our house. And if you can't respect that, maybe you should find alternative arrangements. I kept my voice level, professional. Are you threatening to evict me from my childhood home? I'm suggesting you learn your place. The rage that had been simmering since that first slap threatened to boil over, but I held it back, channeled it into cold observation. Daryl had paint under his fingernails, despite not doing manual labor in years. His shoes were covered in drywall dust. But the kitchen renovation hadn't progressed in months. Where was he actually spending his construction time? The answer came that Saturday. I followed him. Not difficult when someone believes you're too beaten down to fight back. He drove to a house in Riverside Heights, Ashford Ridge's newest development. A Hollis renovation sign stood in the yard, but the house belonged to Margaret Chen, according to public records. She was 83, widowed, and had hired Daryl for a complete home modernization. I watched him carry out boxes of what looked like vintage fixtures, original brass doorknobs, a stained glass window, items that should have been preserved, not replaced. He loaded them into his truck, then drove to an architectural salvage dealer on the outskirts of town. I couldn't prove it yet, but I recognized the pattern. Overcharge for replacement, sell the originals, double the profit. That night at dinner, wearing my father's ring openly now, I pushed harder. Mrs. Chen called. I lied smoothly. Something about her renovation timeline? Daryl's fork paused midway to his mouth. You spoke to my client? She called the house line, said she's concerned about some missing fixtures. You had no right. To answer our phone? His face went through the color progression I'd memorized. Red to purple, to that dangerous white that preceded violence. Mom's hand found mine under the table, squeezing a warning. The ring, Daryl said, his voice dropping low. You're still wearing it. Yes. I told you to take it off. And I declined. Tessa looked up from her phone, sensing blood in the water. Dad, she's being disrespectful. I'm being factual, I countered. The ring was given to me by my mother. It's not yours to command. Daryl stood slowly, deliberately. Mom's grip on my hand turned painful. In my house, EQ Holdings' house, actually, I interrupted. Would you like to see the deed? The slap came faster this time, harder. My head snapped sideways, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut my cheek. But I'd been ready. My phone, propped against the napkin holder, captured everything. The motion-activated nanny cam I'd installed, telling Mom it was for security, recorded from another angle. Get out, Daryl snarled. Pack your things and get out of my house. I stood, steady despite the ringing in my ears, and smiled with bloody teeth. No. That night, I transformed my bedroom into a war room. Every surface held evidence, organized with the precision I'd learned building cases against financial criminals. The slap had been the final authorization I needed. Daryl had just graduated from suspicious to prosecutable. First, I created the timeline. Color-coded sticky notes on my closet door tracked every incident. Blue for financial irregularities, red for aggressive behavior, yellow for witness threats. My phone backup showed 17 videos, 43 photos, and 162 screenshots of text messages between Mom and me documenting Daryl's controlling behavior. The neighbor's Ring doorbell footage was gold. Mrs. Patterson had gladly shared the clips after hearing raised voices concerned me. The audio was clear enough to make out Daryl's words. I own this place now. Your daughter needs to learn that. I uploaded everything to 3 separate cloud services, then created a physical backup on an encrypted drive I kept in my office desk at Northlight Ledger. In compliance, redundancy wasn't paranoia, it was protocol. At 2 a.m., I called Rhea Keene's emergency line. She'd given it to me with specific instructions. When he escalates, not if, when, call immediately. He struck me again, I said without preamble. I have video evidence. Are you safe currently? Yes, locked in my room. He's in the master bedroom. Mom's in the guest room. He made her sleep there after dinner. Tomorrow morning, file a police report. I'll meet you at the station at 8 a.m. Bring everything. I spent the remaining hours organizing my financial evidence. The Hollis Family Outreach Fund's tax filings revealed a pattern. Donations came in from local businesses, likely expecting charitable work. The money went out as administrative costs and contractor fees, paid to Hollis Renovations. The construction company then billed those same amounts back to our house renovation, essentially double dipping. It was money laundering, amateur hour edition. The police station at 8 a.m. was eerily quiet. Officer Janet Reeves took my statement with professional detachment until she saw the video. "Ma'am, this is assault, clear as day. Do you want to press charges?" "I want a temporary protective order first," Rhea interjected. "My client needs secure access to her residence while we sort the larger issues." The paperwork took 3 hours. By noon, I had a TPO requiring Daryl to maintain 50 feet distance and prohibiting him from entering the house without police escort. The order would be served that evening when he returned from his job site. Next stop, Pine County Courthouse. Rhea had prepared the trust activation documents. The clerk's eyes widened seeing the Brennan Harbor Trust name. "Mr. Brennan's Trust? I remember when he established this. He was very thorough. My father had apparently spent his final months creating an elaborate legal maze that no one could navigate without the ring and the knowledge of its purpose. With the trust activated, I gained access to its full records. The discoveries were immediate. Daryl had attempted to take out 3 loans against the house in the past year, all rejected because EQ Holdings required dual signatures he couldn't forge. But he'd found a workaround, billing fraudulent renovations to create debt that would force a sale. I compiled a 20-page report in the format I used for Northlight Ledger's regulatory filings. ***. Subject: Financial Exploitation Investigation. Hollis/Quinn. Hollis Residence. ***. Key findings: $247,000 in suspicious renovation charges, evidence of invoice manipulation and duplicate billing, potential violation of Pine County Code Section 12.34, contractor fraud, misuse of charitable funds, Hollis Family Outreach Fund, attempted unauthorized leveraging of trust-protected assets. Rhea reviewed it with the expression of a cat presented with a particularly fat mouse. "This is exceptional work. We need one more thing: proof of intent to commit financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. My mother isn't. Legally, she's over 60, and he's isolated her financially and emotionally. That's enough for Adult Protective Services involvement. I hadn't considered that angle. Mom was 63, still sharp but increasingly anxious. The way she'd hidden the ring transfer, her trembling hands, her retreat to the guest room, it painted a picture I'd been too angry to see fully. That afternoon, I made 3 more strategic moves. First, I contacted Adult Protective Services and filed a report. The social worker, Beth Martinez, took notes with growing concern. Second, I notified the State Contractor Licensing Board about potential fraud in Hollis Renovations billings. They opened an investigation immediately. Third, I sent a formal notice to First Pine County Bank, where Daryl had his business accounts, alerting them to potential fraudulent loan applications using our address. Banks hate fraud exposure. They froze his credit applications within hours. By evening, my phone had 37 missed calls from Daryl's number. The voicemails progressed from angry to threatening to pleading. I saved them all. Mom texted at 9 p.m. "He knows about the protective order. He's at Tessa's apartment. Says you've ruined everything." I replied, "Everything's just beginning. Trust me. Don't sign anything." The final piece of my Day 1 offensive was an email to the IRS's fraud reporting system, attaching the Hollis Family Outreach Fund's questionable 990 forms. The automatic response promised review within 45 business days. In my experience, it would be much sooner. Charity fraud got fast-tracked. The conference room at Brennan Harbor Trust's offices occupied the top floor of a building I'd passed 1,000 times without knowing my father owned it. Rhea had orchestrated everything with theatrical precision, scheduling the estate planning meeting for 3 p.m. on Thursday, late enough that Daryl would arrive stressed from a day of damage control, early enough that we'd have full business hours to execute our plan. He'll bring his own lawyer, Rhea predicted, adjusting the recording equipment hidden within the room's architectural details. Probably someone who owes him favors. He'll bring documents to force your mother to sign. Let him present everything. The more he reveals, the more we can use. I arranged the room myself, placing water bottles with labels facing out, a compliance trick that makes people feel watched, more likely to fidget and reveal tells. The ring sat in a velvet box at the center of the table, catching afternoon light like a blue star. Mom arrived first, accompanied by Beth Martinez from APS, who'd insisted on attending as an observer. Mom wore the yellow cardigan I hadn't seen in months, a small rebellion that made me proud. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "I should have done this sooner." "You did it exactly when you needed to," I assured her. The trust's representative, James Whitmore, arrived next, a man who looked like he'd stepped from Dad's old photographs, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He carried a leather portfolio that looked older than me. "Miss Quinn, your father spoke of you often. He predicted this meeting, in a way, not the specifics, but the necessity." At 3:07, Daryl entered with exactly the entourage Rhea predicted. His lawyer, Tom Garrison, known for quick divorces and questionable ethics, Tessa for moral support, and surprisingly, two men I recognized from his construction crew, witnesses, probably, to whatever he planned to force. "Let's make this quick," Daryl announced, not sitting. "Evelyn needs to sign these documents to clarify the estate situation. There's been some confusion about property ownership." He slapped down a stack of papers. I speed-read them upside down. Quitclaim deeds, power of attorney forms, and buried on page 12, a loan application for $400,000 using the house as collateral. "Before anyone signs anything," Rhea interjected smoothly, "we need to establish who has legal authority to make decisions regarding the trust property." "What trust?" Garrison demanded. "Mr. Hollis is Evelyn's husband. He has spousal rights." "To property held in trust?" Rhea's smile was razor-sharp. "I think not, Mr. Whitmore. Would you explain the situation?" Whitmore opened his portfolio with ceremonial gravity. "The Brennan Harbor Trust, established by Cole Brennan, holds controlling interest in EQ Holdings, which owns the property at 47 Maple Drive. The trust includes specific provisions for succession of control." "This is ridiculous," Daryl snapped. "Evelyn, tell them you want to sign these papers." Mom looked at me, then at the ring box. "Actually, I transferred my trustee authority 3 days ago." "You can't just," Garrison started. "She can," Whitmore interrupted. "According to Section 7, Subsection 3 of the trust documents, upon presenting the Brennan signet ring to a designated heir with the explicit verbal declaration of transfer, temporary trustee authority passes immediately." I opened the ring box, then slipped the sapphire onto my finger, which makes me the current trustee with full authority over all trust assets. Daryl's face went through its color progression. "That's not legal. You can't just—" "Additionally," Rhea continued, pulling out her laptop, "we have some concerns about recent financial transactions involving the property. Would you like to explain these invoices, Mr. Hollis?" She connected to the room's display screen. Invoice after invoice appeared. The inflated renovation costs, the duplicate billing, the mysterious transfers between Hollis Renovations and the charity fund. "Those are legitimate business expenses," Daryl insisted, but his crew members exchanged nervous glances. "Really?" I stood, remote in hand. "Then you won't mind explaining this?" The screen changed to show security footage from Richmond's architectural salvage. There was Daryl, selling items that matched the inventory, supposedly replaced at 3 different job sites, including ours. That's taken out of context. The context of selling Margaret Richmond's original fixtures while billing her insurance for replacements. I clicked again. She's provided a sworn affidavit. By the way, she's quite upset about her missing stained glass. Tom Garrison was already packing his briefcase. "Daryl, we need to discuss." Sit down. Daryl snarled at him, then turned to Mom. Evelyn, you're my wife. You know I've only tried to improve our situation. By hitting my daughter? Mom's voice was quiet but steady. She provoked. Another click. The dining room video played on screen. Daryl's hand connecting with my face. The sound crisp through the conference room speakers. Beth Martinez took notes. The construction workers stepped back toward the door. Mr. Hollis, Whitmore said formally. As acting trustee, Ms. Quinn has exercised her authority to freeze all accounts and credit lines associated with the trust property. This includes the operating account you've been using for renovations. You can't. Furthermore, Rhea added, the protective order prohibits you from entering the property except to retrieve personal belongings under police supervision. Mrs. Quinn will be filing for divorce tomorrow, with a strong case for financial abuse and asset manipulation. Daryl lunged for the papers he'd brought, but I was faster, sliding them across to Rhea. Attempting to coerce someone into signing financial documents? She photographed each page. That's felony financial abuse of a vulnerable adult in Pine County. Now, Rhea said, her voice cutting through Daryl's sputtered protests. Let's discuss what happens next. The conference room screen shifted to a new document, a formal audit report bearing the Brennan Harbor Trust seal. Whitmore stood, assuming the authority of someone who'd overseen millions in assets for decades. As of this morning, our forensic accountant completed a preliminary review. Mr. Hollis, you've extracted approximately $247,000 from the property through fraudulent billing. Additionally, the Hollis Family Outreach Fund shows irregularities suggesting wire fraud across state lines, a federal offense. You can't prove. Invoice 2847, I interrupted, pulling up the document. Billed to our house for premium marble countertops. Invoice 2851, same countertops billed to the Wilson renovation. Invoice 2859, those exact countertops, again, billed to the Hollis Family Outreach Fund as a community center improvement, the community center that doesn't exist. Garrison stood abruptly. I'm no longer representing Mr. Hollis in this matter. Sit down, Daryl shouted, but his lawyer was already at the door. Tom, you owe me. Not this much, Garrison replied, leaving without looking back. The construction workers followed, one muttering about unpaid overtime anyway. Now it was just Daryl and Tessa facing our assembled team. Tessa was frantically texting, probably trying to move assets before the freezes hit. The ring. Whitmore continued, gesturing to my hand. Triggered something your lawyer should have caught, Mr. Hollis. When Mrs. Quinn transferred trustee authority to her daughter, it activated a look-back provision. Every transaction involving trust property for the past 3 years becomes subject to review and reversal. I pulled up another document. That includes the $50,000 loan you took from Mom's personal account for emergency repairs that never happened, the $30,000 in charges to her credit cards for your business expenses, the lease on your Mercedes, paid from the joint account that was supposed to be for household expenses. Evelyn wanted me to have those things, Daryl said, but his voice had lost its edge. Tell them, Evelyn. Mom looked at him with something I hadn't seen before, pity mixed with disgust. I wanted a partner, not a parasite. Now we come to the criminal matters, Rhea said, pulling out a new folder. The district attorney's office has expressed interest in pursuing charges, assault, financial elder abuse, contractor fraud, and potential RICO violations related to the charity. RICO? Tessa finally spoke, her voice cracking. That's organized crime. When you systematically use a charity and construction company to defraud multiple victims, I shrugged. The shoe fits. Beth Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Hollis, Adult Protective Services is prepared to pursue immediate intervention. However, if you agree to certain conditions, criminal prosecution might be adjusted. Daryl's jaw worked soundlessly, the king of the castle, reduced to a cornered rat. What conditions? Whitmore slid a document across the table. Immediate vacation of the property, surrender of all claims to marital assets, repayment of misappropriated funds within 60 days, dissolution of the Hollis Family Outreach Fund with remaining legitimate funds distributed to actual charities, and a permanent restraining order protecting both Mrs. Quinn and Miss Quinn. That's everything I have. No, I corrected. That's everything you stole. You still have your construction business. Assuming the licensing board doesn't revoke your permits, you still have your apartment, your truck, your tools. That's more than you left my mother. I want a lawyer. You had one. Rhea noted. He just left. You're welcome to find another. But this offer expires when we leave this room. After that, we proceed with full criminal prosecution. The screen changed again, now showing emails between Daryl and his banker, discussing how to work around Mom's signature requirements, how to pressure the old bird into compliance. You called my mother an old bird? I asked. In writing? To your banker? The same banker who's already received our fraud notice? Daryl grabbed for the papers, his hand shaking. If I sign this, it's over? No prosecution? For the financial crimes. Beth clarified. The assault charges are up to Miss Quinn. Every instinct screamed to pursue those charges, to see him in handcuffs. But I looked at Mom, tired, smaller, but finally with backbone straightening. Sign it all. Leave tonight. Never contact us again, and I won't pursue the assault charges. I said, but if you violate any part of this agreement, even a phone call, even driving past the house, I have enough evidence to put you away for years. Dad, don't, Tessa started. Shut up, he snapped at her, grabbing the pen. He signed every page, initial every clause, his face aging years with each signature. When he finished, Whitmore collected the documents with clinical efficiency. The locks will be changed by 6 p.m. I informed him, you have 2 hours to collect your belongings. Police escort only. Anything you leave behind will be donated or destroyed. Daryl stood, deflated. His empire collapsed, but he couldn't resist one last attempt at dominance. You think you've won? You've destroyed a good man trying to take care of his family. I stood too, the ring catching the light. You thought this ring belonged to my mother. You thought she was weak, alone, defenseless. But this ring belonged to my father, a man who saw you coming before you even existed. And now? I smiled with all my teeth. Now it belongs to me. You didn't marry into a family fortune. Daryl, you married into a trap. The locksmith arrived at 5:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Daryl's deadline. I watched from the living room window as he worked, installing new deadbolts and a smart lock system that would alert my phone to any attempted entry. Mom sat beside me, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He's here, she said quietly. Daryl's Mercedes pulled up, followed by a Pine County Sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Williams, whom I'd met that morning when filing additional paperwork, stepped out first. He'd reviewed the protective order twice, making sure everything was enforceable. 2 hours, Deputy Williams announced as Daryl emerged. Personal belongings only, no furniture, no electronics belonging to the household, no documents except personal identification. Tessa pulled up in her SUV, presumably to help load. She glared at me through the window, mouthing something that didn't require lip-reading expertise to understand. Inside, Daryl moved like a ghost of his former self. The commanding presence that had filled our house with tension for 2 years had evaporated. He grabbed clothes from the master bedroom, throwing them into garbage bags Tessa held open. His awards from the Hollis Family Outreach Fund, all self-granted, went into a box. The tools in the garage are mine, he told Deputy Williams. Receipt? I asked through the deputy. Daryl couldn't produce one. The tools stayed. At one point, he tried to take Mom's jewelry box, claiming it contained gifts he'd given her. Every piece in there predates you by decades, I said, holding up photos from Mom's 40th birthday, 15 years ago, wearing the same pieces. Try again. By 7:15, they were loading the last garbage bag. Daryl had managed to fill his Mercedes trunk and Tessa's SUV with his belongings: suits, personal files, a few books, his collection of watches that I suspected were purchased with stolen funds but couldn't prove yet. "The office equipment," he started, "belongs to Hollis Renovations, not you personally." Rhea interrupted from the porch. She'd stayed to ensure compliance. "Company assets aren't personal belongings." The moment of final defeat came when Daryl reached for a framed photo on the hallway table. Him and Mom at their wedding. "That's mine," Mom said, her first words directly to him since the meeting. "The frame was my mother's. The photo is my property. You can have a copy if you want one." He left it. As they prepared to leave, Whitmore arrived with a final document. "Mr. Hollis, this is formal notice that the trust has filed for recovery of fraudulent transfers. You'll receive service of process within 72 hours. I suggest you retain competent counsel, different counsel than before." "This is harassment," Tessa spat. "We'll sue for emotional distress." "Please do," I replied. "Discovery would be fascinating." The sheriff's deputy stood between us, hand resting casually on his duty belt. "Time's up. Let's move along." But Daryl had one more card to play. "The charity gala is Saturday. I'm the host, the donors, the venue. They're all expecting me." "Correction," Whitmore said, pulling out his phone. "The Brennan Harbor Trust has assumed sponsorship of the gala. Mrs. Quinn will attend as the primary host. You're no longer welcome at the venue." "You can't." The Grand Ashford Hotel contract was signed by the Hollis Family Outreach Fund, which is under investigation. The trust has agreed to cover all legitimate expenses to prevent donor embarrassment. Consider it a gift. We're saving your reputation's last shred." Daryl's face cycled through emotions: rage, disbelief, and finally, a hollow acceptance. He walked to his car, each step measured like a man approaching the gallows. "The house in Riverside Heights," he said, turning back. "My renovation project. I need that income." "Mrs. Richmond has terminated your contract," I informed him. "She's hired Brennan Construction." "Yes, that's a subsidiary of the trust. To complete the work properly. We'll be returning her original fixtures that mysteriously appeared at various salvage shops." "Brennan Construction doesn't exist." "It does as of this morning, fully licensed, bonded, and insured. We've even hired some of your better workers, the ones you weren't paying overtime." Tessa slammed her SUV's door hard enough to echo down the street. "You've ruined us!" "No," Mom said, stepping onto the porch, her voice carrying clear and strong. "You ruined yourselves. We just turned on the lights." Daryl's final words came as he started his engine. "I'll be back, when you're not expecting it, when you think you're safe." Deputy Williams leaned into his window. "Sir, that sounded like a threat. Would you like to rephrase?" Daryl said nothing, pulling away slowly. Tessa followed, honking twice in what I assumed was supposed to be insulting. As their taillights disappeared, Mom's phone buzzed, then mine, then Rhea's. "First Pine County Bank." Rhea read from her screen. "They've frozen all accounts pending investigation. The business credit line has been revoked." "State Contractor Board," I added, reading mine. "Emergency suspension of license pending hearing." Mom looked at hers and actually smiled. "Beth Martinez, APS has opened a formal investigation. They want to interview me tomorrow about potential financial elder abuse patterns." We stood on the porch, 3 women watching the empty street. The house felt different already, lighter, like windows had been opened after years of stale air. "The ring," Mom said, touching it on my finger. "Your father would be proud. He saw this coming, didn't he? Maybe not Daryl specifically, but something like him." She nodded. "Cole always said fortune attracts predators. He wanted to make sure we had teeth if we needed them." The locksmith's van had barely turned the corner when Mom and I stood alone in our reclaimed house. The silence felt different. Not the oppressive quiet of Daryl's reign, but something peaceful, like the first morning after a storm passes. "I want to see it," Mom said suddenly. See what? Everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every trap Cole laid that just saved us. We spread it all across the dining room table, the same table where Daryl had laid his inflated invoices and fraudulent contracts just days ago. Now it held the architecture of his downfall. Trust documents, forensic accounting reports, screenshots of his incriminating emails, the cease and desist orders that were already dismantling his empire. Your father started planning this the day he got his diagnosis, Mom said, tracing her finger over Cole's signature on the trust papers. 8 years ago, he said, Evie, you're going to want companionship again. That's okay. But some men see widows as opportunities, not partners. I thought he was being paranoid. He was being a strategist, I corrected, holding up the ring to the light. The sapphire seemed to pulse with its own inner fire. He knew I'd inherited his skepticism, his need to document everything. He bet on me being the backup plan. My phone buzzed. Whitmore. Account recovery initiated. $247,000 in fraudulent charges identified. Civil recovery proceedings begin Monday. Then another. 3 more victims came forward after news broke. Richmond, Zhao, and Patterson all filing complaints about overcharging. Mom laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. He's finished, isn't he? Thoroughly. We ordered Chinese food from the place Daryl had banned because he didn't like the smell. We ate straight from the containers in the living room, his former office, while I set up Mom's piano to be moved back upstairs. The movers could come tomorrow. Tonight, we just wanted to breathe. I need to tell you something, Mom said, setting down her lo mein. The night before I gave you the ring, Daryl had papers drawn up to put me in a conservatorship, said I was showing signs of confusion, that I needed help managing my affairs. My blood chilled retroactively. Mom! I knew then that Cole was right. The ring wasn't just protection. It was a weapon, and I knew you'd know how to use it. The doorbell interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door, holding a casserole dish. Saw the locksmith, she said when I opened the door. Figured you might need this. She lowered her voice. That man's been parking outside at odd hours. You know, taking pictures of the house. My Ring doorbell caught it all. Already sent the footage to that nice deputy. The neighborhood knew. They'd been watching, documenting, waiting for us to make our move. By 10 p.m., Mom was at her piano, playing Chopin, badly. Her fingers rusty from months of silence, but playing nonetheless. I sat with my laptop, fielding emails from Rhea about next steps, from Whitmore about trust administration, from Beth Martinez about Mom's follow-up care. Then one email stopped me cold. From Tessa. You destroyed my father. That house was supposed to be mine. The money was supposed to be mine. You'll regret this. I forwarded it to Deputy Williams with a note. Violation of protective order via third party? His response was swift. On it. This constitutes harassment. We'll have a chat with Miss Hollis tomorrow. Mom transitioned from Chopin to something I recognized. Dad's favorite. Claire de Lune. Her fingers found their memory, the notes flowing smoother now. You know what the trust's full name is? She asked without stopping her playing. The Brennan Harbor Trust. Cole said harbors aren't just for shelter. They're for launching ships. He built us a harbor. Laurel, safe anchorage when we needed it. And now? Now we sail where we want. I finished. The next morning brought satisfying confirmations. The IRS had fast-tracked their investigation into the Hollis Family Outreach Fund. The State Attorney General's office wanted to discuss potential RICO charges. 3 more contractors had joined the complaint against Hollis Renovations, claiming unpaid wages and stolen materials. But the best moment came when I walked into the kitchen to find Mom making breakfast. Eggs Benedict, complex and time-consuming, the kind of meal Daryl had declared unnecessarily fancy. I'm selling his Mercedes, she announced. It's still in my name. He insisted, for tax purposes. The money will go to actual charity, the real kind. Which one? The Pine County Women's Shelter, Seems appropriate. I held up the ring, watching morning light fracture through the sapphire. Should I keep wearing it? That's yours now, Mom said firmly. Your inheritance, your protection, your reminder that someone saw all this coming and loved us enough to plan for it. The doorbell rang. Another neighbor, this time with muffins and a confession that she'd been keeping a log of Daryl's suspicious activities for months. The community that Daryl had tried to impress was closing ranks around us instead. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Daryl's new lawyer. I deleted them all without listening. Rhea would handle whatever desperate plays he attempted. Standing in our kitchen, truly ours again, I realized the ring had done more than activate a trust. It had activated something in me, in Mom, in the entire network of people who'd been waiting for someone to stand up to Daryl Hollis. The king was dethroned, the castle was ours, and somewhere, I was certain, Cole Brennan was smiling. The ring would stay on my finger, not as jewelry, but as a reminder. Some inheritances aren't about money. They're about the foresight to protect those you love, even from beyond the grave. Especially from beyond the grave. Daryl had been right about one thing. The ring hadn't belonged to my mother. It had belonged to a chess player who'd won the game 8 years before it started. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your experiences and perspectives mean everything to this community.